The first thing to vanish wasn't my name. It was my reflection in his eyes, that specific glint of possession and approval I had learned to crave. It dissolved on a rainy evening on the marble steps of the house I kept perfect, replaced by the flat, assessing stare you'd give a piece of furniture delivered to the wrong address. His words weren't heated, they were a calibrated dismissal. "You understand the situation, of course," he stated, his voice as polished as the vintage watch he checked. "The investors arrive in 20 minutes. And frankly, Eliza, the physicality of it all, the waddling, it compromises the aesthetic." He pressed a hotel keycard into my palm, his touch as cold as the raindrop tracing my spine. "Stay there. Just until you're presentable again." The lock clicked with a finality that echoed in the hollow of my chest. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I stood there, the discarded centerpiece of his flawless life, and felt the most terrifying sensation of all, a profound, clarifying silence. The performance was over. That click of the lock wasn't a beginning. It was the period on a sentence I'd been handwriting for years in my own compromise. I drove my sensible sedan, the one he derided for clashing with his Aston Martin's brand alignment, into the neon-blurred heart of the city. My mind, however, was no longer blurred. It was a sharp, cold lens focusing on the truth. Our marriage hadn't been a union. It was a permanent, high-stakes open house, and I was the most important staging piece. He didn't sell homes. He sold an illusion of effortless, curated perfection. And for 5 years, I was the living proof of his success. People often asked why I, an architect with a promising career, walked away from my firm the month after our wedding. Robert crafted a charming story. He was traditional, a provider, he wanted to spoil me. It was a beautiful, market-tested lie. The reality was a brutal, unspoken clause in our contract. In his world, a wife with a career was a sign the husband wasn't a true apex predator. A trophy wife, however, silent, elegant, idle, was the ultimate luxury asset. She didn't contribute to the mortgage. Her existence was the mortgage. I wasn't being pampered. I was being acquired. I mistook his control for a fierce, protective love. His opinions on my friends, my wardrobe, my occasional glass of wine, I framed them as care. Standing under the flickering sign of the Grand View Motel, the buzzing neon the only elegy for my old life, I finally saw it. He wasn't protecting me. He was curating me. I was the rare mid-century chaise in his gallery, expensive, beautiful, and utterly forbidden to develop a scratch. But pregnancy is the antithesis of curation. It is glorious, undeniable life. It is swollen ankles and heartburn and a body that defiantly rewrites its own blueprint. By carrying his child, I hadn't just gained weight. I had malfunctioned. I was a prop that no longer fit the minimalist aesthetic of his narrative, so I was being moved to storage, a $89 a night motel room, until I could be restored. The room smelled of lemon-scented disinfectant and stale dreams. I sat on the stiff bedspread, listening to the arrhythmic hum of the mini-fridge. And then, a sound escaped me, a short, sharp burst of air that was too bitter to be a laugh. The absurdity was colossal. The man who had just evicted me for ruining his brand's aesthetic was blissfully, arrogantly ignorant. He thought I was Eliza, the scholarship student from a quiet town who loved drafting tables and quiet libraries. He believed the persona I had so carefully constructed, manageable, modest, and magnificently dependent. He did not know my maiden name was Van Horn. He had never bothered to look beyond the character I played. He didn't know my grandfather wasn't a retired teacher, but William Van Horn, who founded the investment firm that literally owned the skyline Robert aspired to conquer. And the modest trust fund, from a distant relative I'd mentioned once? It was a portfolio, untouched and quietly compounding since my 25th birthday, currently holding just over $72 million. I hadn't hidden this to deceive. I'd hidden it in a desperate, foolish bid to be loved. I'd watched money warp every genuine interaction around my family growing up. I wanted someone to choose my mind, my heart, the essence of me, not the staggering number attached to my last name. So, I performed poverty. I let Robert lecture me on household budgeting. I feigned awe at his quarterly commissions that were rounding errors in my quarterly dividends. I told myself this sacrifice, this making myself small, was the foundation of something real and untainted. I was not building a foundation. I was welding the bars of my own gilded cage, one compromise at a time. By dimming my own light, I hadn't attracted a man who loved me. I had attracted a man who loved that I was conveniently dim. The good wife narrative was not a virtue, it was a vulnerability I had written into my own contract. Staring at my ghostly reflection in the motel room's dark television screen, I saw her, that carefully constructed woman, finally fade away. She had been left on the marble steps in the rain. The woman in this room was done with her own erasure. It was time to stop surviving within the narrative he'd authored and start drafting my own. This wasn't about an emotional outcry, it was a strategic pivot. I opened the old laptop I kept in my car's emergency kit. I wasn't logging on to cry to a friend or research divorce lawyers. I was accessing the encrypted digital vault I hadn't touched in half a decade, the one labeled Van Horn Legacy. The login screen appeared. I typed the passphrase, a line from an Emily Dickinson poem my grandfather loved. The screen bloomed to life, bathing my face in the cool, blue light of 9-digit balances. Column after column of assets, holdings, and liquid cash. Robert wanted to play in the major leagues. To impress Titans? Excellent. He was about to meet one. And she was formulating a hostile takeover. But first, I needed incontrovertible proof of the enemy's disposition. Not of infidelity. That was a predictable, almost mundane transgression. I needed to understand the depth of the rot. 3 days after my eviction, I remembered the camera. I'd installed a tiny high-resolution nanny cam in the nursery ceiling weeks before, a hopeful gesture to someday watch my baby sleep. Now, it would serve a darker, more vital purpose. A due diligence report on the true nature of my investment. I accessed the live feed. The room, painted a soft butter yellow, sat empty. Then, emotion alert, 2:14 p.m. I tapped play. He was there. And he wasn't alone. Sienna, a wellness influencer, he occasionally hired to stage properties with her curated brand of green juice vitality. She was leaning against the changing table I'd sanded and stained myself, running a manicured finger over the hand-stitched mobile dangling above the crib. "It's so quaint," she sighed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Are you really going to keep all this?" Robert's laugh was a sound that iced my blood. He was pacing, phone in hand. "God, no. This room is a monument to wasted square footage. Do you know what a dedicated executive office adds to the appraisal in this zip code?" But Eliza had a vision. He stopped, put a hand to his chest, and mimicked my voice in a shrill, pathetic falsetto. "The baby needs a sanctuary. She's so biologically determined." "It's kind of sad," Sienna offered, a pout in her voice. "It's inefficient," he corrected, his tone switching back to its cold precision. He walked over to the solid oak crib and gave it a dismissive kick with his Italian loafer. "Look at the footprint of this thing. It's a colossus. Where is my Peloton supposed to go? Seriously, the kid isn't even here yet and it's already monopolizing real estate. It's going to destroy my sleep cycle. It's going to completely annihilate the energy of the house." I froze. My finger stabbed the rewind button. "It's going to completely annihilate the energy of the house." I listened again. This wasn't mere annoyance or fear of responsibility. This was something more profound, more pathological. He didn't just resent the inconvenience of a baby. He viewed our child as a direct competitor, a tiny, demanding rival for the spotlight, the attention, the energy he believed was his sole birthright. My pregnancy wasn't a shared journey, it was a narcissistic injury. I was no longer a mirror reflecting his glory. I was becoming a son, and he couldn't stand the shadow. The psychological clarity was devastating. He hadn't evicted me because I was swollen. He had removed me because I was powerful. I was creating a new center of gravity in his universe, and his ego couldn't share the orbit. Watching Sienna pull him into a kiss, right there in the middle of the sanctuary I'd built with my own hands, I felt no spike of jealousy. Instead, a cold, metallically certain resolve clicked into place in my soul, like the bolt of a vault sliding home. He saw himself as the king of a glass castle. It was time he learned the land itself belonged to me, and I was terminating his lease. My phone, a simple burner purchased the week prior, felt heavy and purposeful in my hand, a detonator. I dialed the number I'd avoided for years, the direct line to the man who taught me that balance sheets were stories and leverage was a language. Eliza. My father's voice was immediate, alert, devoid of its usual CEO gruffness. What's wrong? Not a thing, I said, my voice steady, foreign even to me. But I need to initiate a transaction. I don't need a rescue. I need a corporate asset. Explain. The warmth was gone, replaced by the focused calm of a boardroom. A leveraged buyout, I replied. The target is the Cloudcrest penthouse. And I require Robert to be the broker of record. The silence on the line was profound, filled with the swift, grim calculations of a master strategist. The Cloudcrest is a $40 million listing. He doesn't have the pedigree for that weight class. He will, I said, if he believes he's being scouted by Sterling Capital. I want him to taste that commission. I want him to spend it in his mind before the ink is dry. I want him to leverage his entire world to close it. Another pause, shorter this time. The Trojan horse is ready, my father said, his voice now pure tempered steel. I'll have Marcus brief him within the hour. The trap was a work of art, elegant in its simplicity, brutal in its execution. Marcus, my father's chief financial officer and a man whose demeanor could freeze mercury, placed the call at 9:05 a.m. He played the role of the impatient, supremely powerful intermediary to perfection. He spoke of a reclusive, ultra-high net worth individual, a principal, who valued absolute discretion above all else. The mandate was simple, a cash purchase of the Cloudcrest penthouse, no contingencies, but it required a broker who could operate with unquestionable liquidity and impeccable taste. Robert took the bait with the grace of a starving fish. I knew he would. His ego was the hook, his greed the line. Marcus layered in the genius twist, as a demonstration of commitment and understanding of true luxury service. The broker was to stage the empty penthouse to an extreme, magazine-ready standard for the final signing meeting. All costs, florists, caterers, temporary art installations, were to be borne up front by the broker as a good faith demonstration of capability. It was a test, Marcus intoned, a filter for those who talked about wealth versus those who understood its language. Robert didn't understand, he fantasized. He saw this as his anointing. I monitored our joint accounts, the ones he thought I was too financially naive to track. The numbers bled in real time. He liquidated our shared savings. He maxed out his business line of credit. And then, in a move of breathtaking arrogance and stupidity, he took out a high-interest, short-term loan against his firm's operating capital, likely forging his partner's signature. He was convinced the $1 million-plus commission wire would hit his account within 48 hours, covering the crater he was digging. The spending was a spectacle of vanity. He imported white orchids from Thailand. He commissioned a bespoke ice sculpture for the entryway. He rented a series of forbiddingly abstract paintings from a trendy gallery. He wasn't preparing a property. He was constructing a shrine to his own impending coronation, investing every penny of his fraudulent capital into the fantasy of his own greatness. He called it an investment. I called it a self-funded demise. His call to me that night was a masterpiece of unwitting irony. His voice oozed a magnanimous condescension. "Eliza," he began, as if addressing a slightly dim employee, "I'm calling from a place of generosity. The deal I'm closing tomorrow will change everything. My profile, it will be unrecognizable. When this is done, we will have a serious discussion about your recent behavior and your future here. This hotel tantrum ends. You might want to think about how you plan to apologize." I looked out the motel window at the city he believed he was about to own. "I've been thinking of little else, Robert," I said, my voice soft, neutral. "Good luck with the closing." "Luck," he scoffed, "the word a weapon, is for people who don't prepare. This is execution." He was right. It was. The following afternoon, the Cloudcrest boardroom was a bubble of anxiety and arrogance suspended above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Robert's perceived kingdom. He was at the head of the vast mahogany table, spinning a fountain pen, rehearsing his humility acceptance speech. Sienna was there, draped over a chair, capturing the skyline for her social media, a living accessory. Marcus entered precisely on time. He did not smile. He did not offer his hand. He placed a single, slim folder on the table. "We are ready to proceed," he stated. However, the principal of the acquiring entity insisted on a final review of the broker's compliance with the terms. Robert's smile was magnanimous. "Of course. The staging, as you'll see, is unparalleled. I've personally insured." The double doors opened again. I walked in. The suit was black, tailored not to hide my pregnancy but to frame it as a fact of power, not vulnerability. My hair was sharp. My gaze was sharper. The room's oxygen seemed to vanish. Robert's face didn't register shock first, it registered a systems failure. His brain could not reconcile the weeping wife he'd evicted with the sovereign entity who had just entered. "Eliza?" The word was a broken syllable. Sienna's phone lowered slowly. "Take your seat, Robert," I said. My voice didn't rise. It lowered, gaining the density of a judge's gavel. "You wanted to impress the client. Let's review your performance." I didn't touch the folder Marcus brought. I opened my own briefcase and extracted a different, thicker set of documents. I slid the first page across the gleaming wood. It stopped directly under his paralyzed gaze. "This is a summary of the $82,500 you illegally withdrew from your firm's client escrow account to finance today's floral arrangements. The legal term is embezzlement. It carries a felony charge." His mouth opened. A dry, clicking sound emerged. That was a bridge loan. The commission." "There is no commission," I interrupted, my tone conversational. "Sterling Ventures has owned the Cloudcrest Tower for 9 months. We aren't buying the penthouse. We're auditing the broker." I nodded to Marcus. He placed a second document down. "Your brokerage license has been suspended, effective 9 a.m. this morning, following our notification to the board. The high-interest loan you secured against your partnership? That was facilitated by a subsidiary of ours. We now own that debt." Robert shot to his feet, his chair shrieking against the floor. "This is insane. You can't. I built this. This is my life. You're destroying me because you're jealous. Because you're small." I remained seated, looking up at his splintering fury. "No," I said, my voice so quiet he had to strain to hear it. "I am reclaiming what is mine because you mistook my silence for scarcity." I slid the final document, the only one he ever truly needed to see, across the table. "The divorce petition. You called our child a pollutant. You called me furniture. You are hereby evicted from my life. You are a liability, and I am liquidating." I turned to Marcus. "Security, please." and have the penthouse cleared. The staging is tragically overdone. I stood and walked out, not waiting for the explosion. The collapse, I knew, was already complete in every ledger that matter. The aftermath was not a drama. It was an administrative process, swift and sterile. In the ecosystem of high-stakes real estate, reputation is the only truly valuable currency. Roberts was instantly devalued to zero. His firm, facing the escrow scandal and the loss of its largest phantom deal, terminated him before he even retrieved his Aston Martin from the Cloudcrest valet. The loans were called in immediately. The art gallery sued for non-payment. Sienna's Vitality brand could not withstand association with a publicly ruined man. She was photographed with a new mentor, a tech CEO, within a week. Robert Miller didn't fade away. He was digitally and socially erased. The brand he had polished so obsessively was revealed as a facade, and the city, which thrives on perceived power, simply looked through him. He became a ghost haunting his own former life, a cautionary tale whispered at broker luncheons. He was left with the one thing he'd brought to our marriage, a bottomless, fragile ego, and now, the deafening silence of an audience that had moved on. My life now is built on a different blueprint altogether. I am sitting on the sun-warmed floor of a sprawling, slightly chaotic house. It is not a penthouse. It has creaking floorboards, a garden that fights back against my attempts to tame it, and walls adorned with my son's first finger-painted masterpieces. There is a pile of laundry on the sofa. There are tiny, bright plastic bricks scattered across the rug like confetti. It is messy, alive, vibrant, and gloriously, unequivocally mine. I look down at Arlo, sleeping in the crook of my arm, a tiny fist curled against his cheek, a spot of drool on my silk blouse. I do not think about the aesthetic. I think about the quarterly report for the Van Horn Foundation, which I now chair, and whether the organic peas I pureed for him this morning were sweet enough. My father visits on Sundays. We don't talk about hostile takeovers or market leverage. He sits on this same floor, patiently stacking blocks into precarious towers for the sole purpose of making his grandson giggle when they fall. He told me once, his voice thick with regret, that his greatest failure was teaching me to be so damn polite. I told him he was wrong. The lesson I needed wasn't to roar. It was to finally stop accepting whispers as my native language. I often think of the woman in the Grand View Motel. The one who stared at a crack in the ceiling and calculated her worth based on how well she could make herself disappear. I want to travel back through time, sit on that stiff bed beside her, and tell her this: the good girl trophy she was polishing day and night was not an award. It was a participation prize for her own gradual vanishing act. Making yourself easy to manage is not a virtue, it is an open invitation for managers. The most brutal, liberating lesson from the ruins of my marriage was this: your net worth is a number in a database. Your self-worth is the constitution of your soul. 4 years, my net worth was stratospheric, yet my self-worth was bankrupt, because I had allowed someone else to act as its sole appraiser. I had let him set the terms, define the value, and declare the dividends. I am not low maintenance anymore. That term implies I am an object requiring minimal upkeep. I am not an object. I am a sovereign state. I have high standards, clear borders, and a formidable defense budget. I do not shrink myself to fit the cramped confines of someone else's vision. If the room is too small, I don't adjust my posture. I acquire the building and redesign the space. And if anyone ever again has the audacity to suggest that my reality, my body, my choices, my child, my glorious unedited life, is incompatible with their aesthetic, I will not waste my breath on debate. I will not seek their approval. I will offer them a single silent gesture, the direction of the door. Sometimes, the person who claims to love you is not in love with you at all. They are in love with the empty, perfectly shaped space you agree to occupy in the curated museum of their ego. Your humanity is the one exhibit they cannot afford to display. This story is more than a tale of revenge. It is a blueprint for a different kind of architecture, the architecture of the self. It's about auditing the narratives you've accepted, identifying the toxic liabilities in your emotional portfolio, and having the courage to execute a strategic divestment. Your peace, your identity, your worth are not commodities to be traded on someone else's market. They are the foundation. Everything else is just the property built upon it. If this narrative resonated with you, if you've ever felt the chilling quiet of being curated instead of cherished, or if you're currently in the motel room phase of your own awakening, know this: your clarity is your first asset. Your resolve is your leverage. I share these stories here on Winds of Thought to forge a community not of victims, but of strategists. To remind you that the pen that writes your life's contract is in your hand. The power you feel you've lost is often just hidden, waiting for the right command to activate. If you want more stories that dissect the psychology of power, betrayal, and rebuilding, that offer not just catharsis but a tactical framework for your own liberation, then you belong here. Your engagement is the signal that these messages matter. So, if this added value to your perspective, please hit the like button. It directly supports this channel. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to Winds of Thought. Tap that notification bell so you don't miss our weekly deep dives into the stories that shape us, the hidden truths that free us, and the relentless, beautiful pursuit of becoming undeniably, unapologetically yourself. The next chapter of your own story starts with a single, deliberate choice. Let's write it together.